different. Every restaurant uses different oil. We like to actually look at the jugs. What are they using? Take a look at it. Is it hydrogenated? Is it in a solid form? Are they having to melt down blocks? As you can see, every oil is a different breakdown of those fatty acid chains on the left. So every one of them is going to have different characteristics. Around us, they're building biodiesel as quickly as they can. But they're not building crush facilities. We ask, where will the oil for this plant come from? And what they're saying now is, we'll import it. Oh, really? Where we import it from? Central America, South America, wherever it's cheapest. So what they're going to be doing is bringing in palm oil, which once again is not appropriate for our community in Iowa. It's not sustainable. It's a very bad idea. So we pay a lot of attention to the oil we collect. The first couple of years, we were collecting just very consistent, very high quality oil. But then the oil started to change a little bit. Once again, we start with restaurants. We've gotten into schools a lot more. Hospitals are tending to use really good oil and produce really good grease also. In the schools also, we picked up just a couple dumpsters from the University of Iowa. Each dumpster is 150 gallons of Astoya. Beautiful oil, looks brand new. So we're pumping 300 gallons in maybe 15 minutes or something. Very efficient to do so. So we need to look for the larger producers and think creatively too. The average time from the first time we approach someplace inquiring about their oil and we're actually picking it up, I'd say it probably averages 3 or 4 months. It takes some doing, but really what we think is really important is to look in your community. The oil that we should be processing is what's already there. We shouldn't be looking to exotic crops grown in distant lands. We should be looking for what's grown right in our areas. This is a letter that we oftentimes will initially, as we approach a place, we've decided that we're going to want their oil. We give them this letter. Oftentimes when I go in the afternoon, say, the manager here? No, he's not here. If I say, well, geez, we were interested in your fryer oil, blah, 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 you have to realize what's going to get through to the manager. Well, some guy was here for your oil, is what he's going to hear. So we give them a letter, something like this. It explains who we are, what we're doing, what's in it for them, what they can expect. So then when I approach them a couple days later, they've thought about it perhaps, they have some idea of what's going on, and they may have a few pertinent questions, but it just kind of cuts to the chase. This makes it so that we're not having to check back 6, 8, 10 times. They have some idea of what we're up to. Now we've become the local grease guys. Now I get 2 or 3 calls a week from some restaurants saying, hey, I hear what you guys do. It's fantastic. You want our oil? No, unfortunately, we're just swimming in oil. We can't keep up. My wife's about to kill me. No, literally, we just had 2,000 gallons of oil that got bad hauled off the farm. Moving oil once or twice is a pain in the butt. Then having to get rid of it a couple years later because it's acidified is very bad.
Are people typically paying, restaurants typically paying vendors to pick up oil where you are? Or?
What we're finding is it varies incredibly regionally. We did Wisconsin Renewable Energy Board. There, they're paying for it. And that's the first time we've really heard that. It is starting to change. Yeah, it is starting to change. Although this fellow in Wisconsin who approached us said, he's got a processor, and they're excited, but nobody will give me their oil. And he said, they're paying for it around here. I said, well, how much are they paying? He said, $22 for a 350-gallon dumpster.
Thank you.
I said, how do you know this? He said, well, I asked. Who'd you ask? Well, the restaurant where I eat every day. Oh, well, how much do you spend there? It was my lunch and grandparents and kids. And, we're spending a couple $1,000s a month at this restaurant. I said, okay, so National Byproducts is going to give this restaurant $22 every 3 or 4 months for the oil, or they can give it to you as a customer who's actually going to spend the dollars that you're going to save in that restaurant or in the hardware store who eats at the restaurant. We need to keep those dollars at work in our community. And this is really the angle where we can just kick the shit out of Animax, is they don't care. They don't offer service. They're not nice. They're not.
Hey, Steve, if you move right over here, we can get you in the camera. Sorry. Thanks.
Okay.
That's a little awkward, but thank you.
Similar jealous, by the way. some people are paying, so we pay a couple of customers. Some people, the big guys are charging, some really nice oil customers.
That's why we think it's so important to develop these relationships now. As the market changes and they're starting to get paid for it, if you've been picking it up consistently for a year and a half, they're happy with you, they love you, better yet, the owner drives a diesel and you give them a jug of fuel every once in a while, you can bet your butt the Animax driver is not laying fuel on the owner.
Right.
We look at the places we eat are the best ones. The places between where you work and where you live, those are probably going to be the ones that are most efficient to pick up from.
Have you had any success with creating contracts that have a set period of time that they guarantee to give you their oil?
We've really shied away from contracts. We would rather develop a relationship and not depend on a piece of paper that says it. The University of Iowa actually asked us to bid the contract to pick up all of their oil. And it was about a 30-page contract, and it made us responsible for picking it up. If we failed to execute, they would hire somebody to do it at our cost. And we realized that they were called national byproduct and say, hey, come today. And this is a good example. One day the university called us up and said, hey, we're putting in some new cement in the dock area. We've got to get this dumpster moved today. Is there any way you can come like before noon and pump this dumpster out? And I said, I'll be right there. And you can bet your butt now that they're so incredibly loyal to us. But they're also a good example. About half of our co-op members are university employees. So they're already covered under university insurance. It seems like a really easy deal. The guys on the dock are, please take this away. They're overflowing, they stink, come and get it. But we waited. It took about an extra 6 months of negotiations to finally get official permission to pick it up. But now we're actually written into the university's contracts. They're allowed to remove grease for experimental purposes. We're their experimental purpose. So we're actually, National Byproducts comes and pumps their dumpsters on Tuesday. We show up on Monday. and get the best of the grease.
Our universities in Mississippi are going to Airbar. Is that the same thing you're finding in Iowa?
You know, there's a few really big players, Burbank, Animax. There seem to be a lot more of them. It used to be a couple players. But they play hard too. Frankie's had good luck with his local renderer being fairly nice, but they're not necessarily the nicest guys to deal with. We've actually gotten warnings. I got a call from National Byproducts saying, hey, we've had 4 or 5 accounts call us in the last week, tell us to come pick up our dumpsters. They mentioned your name. We thought you'd give you a call and see what you're up to. Oh, we're making a little biodiesel. And they said, well, we'd be happy to sell you that oil. Oh, really? Hooray! This was a few years ago. I think they said 15 cents a pound. Oh.
And of course, that's filtered in water, right?
Yeah, that's what they said.
Wonderful.
So I said, let me get this straight. You're going to send a truck from Minnesota down to Iowa City. You're going to haul it back to Sioux City, de-water it, and then bring it back to me. Sell it to me for over $1 a gallon. And I said, how about you guys stay home and we'll take care of the oil in our community. They didn't like that very much. But it's something to keep in mind. I was also at the State House lobbying for a small-scale producer's exemption. And a renewable energy lobbyist friend pulled me aside and said, you guys collecting a lot of oil. And I said, well, you know, 400 or 500 gallons a week, you know. He said, well, just a friendly heads up, they're East Coast Mafia. And eventually, they're going to take exception to what you're doing and come after you. Geez, I'm like, all right. He goes, well, you better cross your T's and dot your I's, because eventually, they're going to slap you back. So the next day, I made appointments with the fire marshal, planning and zoning, anybody who might have any sort of regulatory oversight, let them know what we were doing, getting material safety data sheets. And both the city and county wanted to join our co-op. They thought it was such a great idea, they said, oh, let's do it. Can we join your co-op? We weren't quite sure how that fit into our structure, but they haven't, but they're interested in doing it again. The more proactive you can be about your collection or your production, the better off you're going to be.
Can I ask, what license do you have, if any, or do you need in your area?
In Iowa, we don't. It's really a very agricultural and we're in a rural area. So for us, other than DOT's regulations, there's really nothing in place. Although in Iowa City, where we're real near, every dumpster is permitted, so it has to have a tag on it. They don't allow barrels, so it has to be like a car can dumpster. So they said they'd be happy to let us do that also. And in looking at partnering up with the city, we're looking at that, having them handle the big dumpsters for us. Now, I think there are opportunities in collection to partner up with renderers who might be interested in fuel. I'd rather make friends than enemies, so it's certainly worth a try reaching out to whoever's around you. But this letter is just the first step to get in. We always test our oil now. These are the guys that you really want to make friends with. These are the guys in the kitchen. We spend a lot of time going around and talking with these guys, making sure they understand what we're doing and why they would really want to do it. These guys think what we're doing is so cool. They're like, dude, that's so cool. We're going to refilter that oil before we put it in your oil. And anybody who messes with it, they're dead. Those are the kinds of people you want. And we really keep up on our oil quite a bit more. We don't let it sit around as long. If there is some problem in that we have a relationship with these people, we can go in and say, what are you guys doing different? Your oil's been titrating at 5 for the last 2 years. All of a sudden it's coming in at 15. Oh, well, we're putting the grill traps in there now. So that might be a simple solution. But your restaurants, they don't want to have to worry about it. They don't want to think about it. They don't want to make any phone calls. It just has to be no hassle. That's what the manager's after. If he can save $500 or $600 a year, that's great. If he can support the local community, that's great, but he doesn't want to screw around. So it's very important that you never leave it up to them to call you or to have a problem. If there is a problem, to be prepared to deal with it immediately. On the inside of the lids that we leave at the restaurants, it's got my home phone number. If there's some problem, they're going to get hold of me or my wife or leave a message on the machine, and I'm going to get right back to them. Because really what we need to do is add value to that relationship. So once again, no matter what happens, even if there is an offer to pay for it, you're such good friends with these people, they're going to get you the oil no matter what happens. There may also be an advantage in being a nonprofit. Then they can consider that grease a contribution in kind and write its value off on their taxes. That's something that National Byproducts cannot do. National Byproducts cannot spend the time to go in and talk to these folks and develop that relationship. You may have the time. Once again, that's why we're doing it in our community. To advertise for them, let the whole community know that they're doing the right thing with their waste resources. And network, talk to these guys in the kitchen. They know other kitchen managers. Their roommate works at another place.
Sorry, Steve, in terms of the nonprofit reaching a contribution, how do you value that? And do you change it over time and you hand them a ticket, or how does that?
We think you could actually use the Chicago Board of Trade yellow grease price. And we are not a nonprofit, so we've not been able to do this, but we think a simple, say, monthly statement, and it wouldn't have to be horribly accurate, but we haven't actually tried this, but it seems like a good possibility, and think of the savings to them and
Right.
through them getting that much extra money. It could be thousands of dollars. One of the things that we do for our accounts is we go in and do grease audits. We evaluate their frying and filtering procedures. We try to get them to fry at a lower temperature. For every 5 degrees above 300, they cut the life of the oil in half. Now, if they drop a fry basket at 300 degrees, it's going to sit there and melt soggy and do nothing. But if they can go from 350 to 340, they're going to get a couple extra days out of that oil. It's not going to burn up so quickly. A lot of restaurants don't filter their oil now. They should. They should be filtering it twice a day. A lot of them filter it once a day, maybe at the end of the evening. We try to get them to filter it twice a day, after the lunch rush and after the dinner rush. They're pulling out the nasties that are in there and solids, particulates, and removing them. The filterings are a really good idea, and they really should be doing it. Even the way their cooks are dumping the fries in the basket. They've got a full bag of fries, and they dump it in that basket. There's a whole bunch of frost on the bottom of that bag. That water hitting the oil is going to break it down really quickly. If they can just take that basket and shake it down over a trash can, it's a lot less water going into the oil to begin with. And even looking at how they're filtering their oil or changing it. The average place, they want to change their oil. They get a big metal pan, they stick it under there, they open the valve, dump it all out. They close the valve, mix up a bucket of soapy water, scrub it all out, and they dump the soapy water into the oil. We don't want that water in the oil. So we're asking them to change something that they're doing. They've been able to take that grease and just dump it down a black hole. It's gone. They never have to think about it again. It's just gone. We're asking them to maintain a much purer waste stream. Keep the water out of it, The most common one we see that really trashes oil out is the grill traps. When they scrape the grills off, or they cook the burgers, the bacon, the chicken, they dump those out and they put that in with their oil. That oftentimes will really contaminate the oil really badly. So we're actually having to ask them to separate that out.
Do they dumpster that? Or do they dumpster that? I mean, how do you, so we've been talking to them, our guys the same way, and it's basically suggesting that they solidify with, kitty litter,
They put it in the freezer, a box in a box in a box, that's going into the trash, dump it into their neighbor's dumpster. There's some things that we do with it. In a couple places, we do actually pick that up and dispose of it in that fashion.
Barbecues are, bad. In Texas, where I've learned a lot
Yeah.
for that grill scrapings, right?
Yeah, well, one of the things we've run into the barbecue places, and we were picking up a bit downtown, and great oil, I traced 3 or 4, but we started picking them up in the fall, and they have a lot of smoker grease that comes off the smoker. And it's real solid, it smells great, you want to slather it on bread. We got behind, and they started mixing that smoker grease in with their fryer oil. And in the winter, it didn't seem to be a problem, but in the summer, all of a sudden, we're pulling in barrels that are titrating at 20. Just what they're doing to it was that smoker grease. It never really gets cooked.
And it's dripping, right? I mean, it's not oil, it's dripping.
Exactly, yeah. So it really degraded the oil really quickly. Last month, we had about 2,000 gallons of oil that had gone bad all around the farm, which was just, it breaks my heart to see that much oil go away.
And you have to pay them to haul it away.
No, actually, we have a lot of local farmers who will come pick it up and put it on their hog feed. Yeah, compared to actually having to dispose of it, it was a revelation. I can't tell you how happy I was. It was a big mess. Because really what it comes down to for these restaurants is every gallon of oil that we can collect is a gallon of oil that doesn't need to be imported. In Iowa, we import 98% of our energy. That's billions of dollars leaving the state, most of it going straight to Saudi Arabia, being used to blow up our troops. And every dollar that I don't spend at a gas station, I spend at some place right in my local community. We spend a lot of money on fuel. People are really, we thought there'd be a tipping point. $2.50 a gallon, $3, people would just, in horror, change their habits. And we're not seeing it. And it's kind of tragic. We feel bad that we cannot collect more oil in our community and put it to work. Because really what it comes down to also is the quality of the oil that you're collecting is very important. Not that you can't pre-treat bad oil, but the less horsing around, the less BTUs, the less money, the less methanol, the less chemicals you have to put in it, the better off you're going to be. So we now test all oil before we agree to pick it up. Before we really start these negotiations, we look at it, we test it, we titrate it. We really want to make sure that it's okay. We spent about 6 months breaking into the Red Lobster chain. Went in 3, 4, 5 times. The guy seemed real receptive. Says, well, we'll have to break our regional contract. I'll have to get the district manager to approve it. He says, we're going to a big meeting. We'll talk to him. That's next month. He came back and said, everybody loved it. How many Red Lobsters in the Midwest do you want to pick up? I don't know. Let's just get it started and see. Well, it was 90 days notice for their renderer. And so this took most of the year, really. Well, then we go to pick it up the first time, and it's just rock solid. I don't know what they use at Red Lobster, but it was just solid. It was just gross. So we had to, I think we might have mixed some in, but we had to drop them after almost.
And it changes the decision about what you eat, too.
It does. There are a lot of places that I no longer eat. Some of the sports bars, what we're picking up, they were putting food in that. It's just gross. And even in just initially ascertaining the quality of the oil inside, I mean, look, if it's festering and bubbling and there's beer bottles and underwear in there, you may want to keep moving on and look someplace else. Because a lot of places, it is. It's like an outhouse, it's a toilet. There's all sorts of horrible stuff going in there. So you want to be really questionable about that oil. One of the things we also don't do is we don't pump the bottoms of the barrels.
Sorry, Steve, I don't want to let you get away that easy talking about dumping a major contract or agreement like Red Lobster. It's not just like, hi, this is Steve, sorry I can't collect anymore. It's a real serious endeavor to say that.
Yeah.
How did that go?
We, actually, they had not gotten rid of their other dumpster, so they wanted to see how it went. So they hadn't gotten rid of that other dumpster. And that's very important, because once that big dumpster disappears, we're online. There's no getting out of it, and do not take that too lightly. That's why we recommend doing this in groups. If you break your leg, it's nice to have a couple people in your co-op to pick up the ball and run with it. Because it really is a serious commitment, and occasionally we've had issues. All 3 of our pumps are broken. 2 people have surgeries and 3 car wrecks, and it's December, and it's not a glamorous thing to do. Do not take lightly entering into these agreements, because especially once they get rid of that other dumpster. We also we started picking up from Chili's, and they kept their other dumpster, but we were taking all the good oil. And after about 6 months, the other renderers said, hey, we're just getting the dregs and the crap. We don't want it. They said, well, you can have a quarter of it or a third of that. And it was actually a difficult account also. They locked the back end of the place at 10:30, so we had to be out by then. And all the deliveries had to come in the morning. So we got all these hoses. It was a long ways away. We had all these hoses. And strangely enough, a lot of restaurants don't have power behind them. There's no outlet, so you can't plug in a pump. Seems kind of weird, but it's one of those things you have to plan for when you're looking at places. I think, frankly, you don't pump anything you can't back right up to. For the convenience and expediency with which you pick this oil up is very important. Even that university account, they oftentimes have big delivery trucks come in. Sometimes we have to go by 3 or 4 times before we can even get into the dock. So we either go real early or real late and avoid the hassle. You only have a few hours to collect oil, and it's going to have to burn gas. It's not very efficient all of a sudden. This really has to be an efficient operation, or you're just going to spend a lot of time horsing around. One of the things we also, did I cover the? Most places, we leave barrels behind. I guess I missed my barrel picture. Some of the restaurants just put it right back into the Cubies that the oil comes in. For the really small places, that actually works fairly well. We give them a very large funnel. The only problem with that is they have to let the grease cool down first. If they dump it into that Cubie hot, it's going to melt it. If they melt 5 gallons of oil onto the floor, they're done. They don't want to mess around. No thanks. Most places, we just leave a nice clean barrel with a tight fitting lid. And then when we go to pump that barrel out, any water, any solids, any mushrooms, anything nasty is usually sunk to the bottom. And then when we pump that out, we don't pump the bottom. We'll leave the bottom 6 inches in there. And then every 5th or 6th time we do that, we'll take all the bottoms of the barrels and condense them into their own barrel and let that settle out. We might get half a barrel of good oil. So we're reducing the amount of contaminants that we're picking up. One of the things that we ran into with all that bad oil is we'd added a bunch of co-op members, and they were very enthusiastic. They went out and added a whole bunch of new accounts, Red Lobsters and Chili's and the barbecue place. It was about in November when we quit processing so much. So we're committing to collecting huge amounts of oil. We're not really using it, so it starts piling up. We get behind, we start getting drippings in it, the oil starts going bad. We started using larger pumps, trash pump. Trash pump, great. Meant to pump, poof, this will be just fine for the oil that we're pumping. Works fairly well, but one of the things we found out is the little priming caps that come in those pumps, they almost always leak. They let little bits of air in. And that big pump, boy, it'll fill a barrel in a couple minutes, but you're sucking a little water in there, getting a little air, you're coming up with lots of meringue. And it can really degrade that oil really quickly, so you can't beat your oil up.
Is this like a gas-fired or electric fired?
It's a gas, it's got like a 5-horse.
2-inch?
2-inch. So we'll have like a pond screen on it, stick it down in there, and boy, it sucks so fast. But here's a peculiarity for us, is the university won't let us leave the premises with anything larger than a 55-gallon barrel. They don't want us filling up a big tote, pulling out onto the highway that somebody smacks into us, and then we got 300 gallons of oil in the river. So we have to do it in barrels. It's really hard to fill up a barrel with a pump that's pumping several hundred gallons a minute. When it does overflow, it's a big geyser 20 feet in the air, and you're standing there. If you like driving home naked, it's not so bad. But you really gotta be careful. You really have to think worst case scenario with these things.
When you leave stuff in the bottom of the barrel, so if you don't pump all the way down, because it's all the fun stuff, it builds up over time, right? So how do you get the restaurant, either you guys empty that?
Yeah. So we'll pump it down to that bottom
Yeah.
schmeg.
Yeah,
And then every 5th or 6th time we empty it, we'll condense all the bottoms into their own barrel, and they'll continue to settle out. And you actually do end up with half a barrel.
so you have more than one barrel at the location in this case?
Yeah,
Gotcha.
because the average restaurant, it's gonna take them a month to fill up a barrel. We usually have 2 barrels there. We pick up every other week or every 3 weeks. So we're never letting them get anywhere near capacity.
So you use no park cans?
No.
Okay, one more, sorry. Cold, when they solidify, those 55-gallon drums, what happens?
They're about 450 pounds,
Yeah.
and we'll cover
Okay.
that.
One more question. Can you tell me like the specs on the pump you use just about the 50-gallon ones when you're not using that, whatever it is, food pump?
Yeah, a lot of what we have they're actually fryer filter pumps, or gear pumps. And they tend to get coated with grease and the switches go bad and restaurants throw them away. They're very expensive. I mean, they're over $1,000 easily. We've had really good luck with putting a new switch on them and pumping for 5 or 6 years with them. So they're not anything that I've seen in a catalog, but they're something we've just been able to scrounge. The trash pumps are something that are available like at Harbor Freight. And they can run $250, $300. They're a little questionable. We'll replace that priming cap on top because they always leak. And screens also. We like to have some sort of a screen on the end, but some of the dumpsters that we do pump have like grates in them and really can't get anything very big. So we kind of fashion some chicken wire tubes that we have over the end. Because you suck a rubber glove into your pump.
Or a rag.
Or a rag, or tin foil, or
That.
condom. You're having to take your pump apart, and it's just a big mess. It's good to have somebody who's real comfortable whipping out their tools and taking the pump apart right there on the scene. It's also why we don't like to have audiences. Like to do it at noon at a Taco John's or something, and there's 20 cars watching their kind of Chinese fire drill routine. It can lead to trouble. So we do titrate all of our oil before we agree to pick it up now. And this is a titration procedure. One of the things we'll do is we'll do the titration with, say, 7 cc's of 1% solution without the oil. And then when we go to the restaurant, we just grab 1 cc of oil, pump it in, shake it up. If it turns pink, we want it. If it doesn't, we know it's over 7. We don't want to bother with it. But we titrate all oil before we agree to pick it up now. We also test for water now, real regularly.
I'm sorry, real quick question. If it's over and you don't pick it up, what do you do?
Before we've agreed to, almost every place in town is already having their grease picked up by natural byproducts. We find a few Chinese places that do just throw it in the trash. But the majority of that is already getting picked up. We just think that how it's being used, most of it's just getting put on animal feed. There's a pretty low value usage. Transportation fuels, much more appropriate use for this waste stream. So we really hit on that quite a bit. So it's already getting picked up, generally. But testing for water is real simple.
The one thing that you would need for as far as testing it at the restaurant, and we've all been to Green's website. Well, here in the next week or 10 days, I didn't get the file, but I didn't get the kit made up to bring with me. But he will actually have a no-go kit. It's going to be fairly inexpensive. So we will set up however you want it set up. If you want oil to titrate at 4, you'll have the vial and a syringe. All you need to do is put a milliliter of oil in there, shake it up, and you'll instantly know if it's less than 5.
Yeah.
$1 sample probably, $1 to $1.25.
Yeah, titrations are cheap and simple. Don't hesitate to do that. But we're also being a lot more careful about testing for water. we'll just take a 100 or a 50 milliliter beaker, fill it half full of oil, stick it in the microwave for a minute. If it's bubbling and popping, you're going to need to dewater that oil before you use it. So these are probably our two most prominent collection methods, just Cubies, as we like to call them. Now, most of the time they'll sit around for several weeks before we use them, so most of the solids will settle into a nice layer on the bottom. We don't dump that into our intake barrels, so we're kind of letting some of the settling do the work. And these yellow lids we really like quite a bit. They're made by Eagle Manufacturing. They snap onto the barrels real tight. They shed water and snow. They come off fairly easily, yet they don't blow off in the wind usually. So they run $10 or $12, so they're a pretty cheap solution. We're also very careful about where we put these barrels. To put it right next to a big dumpster that's going to have a massive truck shoving a huge dumpster in. A 50-gallon barrel getting knocked over full of oil is a huge problem. We don't put them downtown. And you live in a college town on a home football game night, everything's getting busted up. You don't want half a dozen of your barrels getting tipped over, getting a call from the police saying, hey, you've got a serious problem. So we're fairly careful about where we put them. Some places will even keep them in the basement. This place is real nice. It stays warm in the winter, which for us is a really big issue. This is at Mercy Hospital in Iowa City, and just gorgeous oil. It's just beautiful oil. So we work really hard at keeping the best places. This is one of those gear pumps that I mentioned. A lot of restaurants are going to these new systems where it looks kind of like a water heater. It'll be in the basement and gets pumped right down to it. This is one of the pumps that comes with it. They're incredibly expensive systems. We bought the whole thing at an auction for I think $20, which is pretty good for the pump. We've now gone to using a collection trailer also, rather than trashing out every member's truck. We just have a landscaping trailer. You can see it's pretty gorgeous. It'll hold up to 8 barrels and a pump and a big thing of sawdust, so whichever member's collecting, he'll just come, pick up the trailer, and away he goes. It really cuts down on the messes that we have. And that on the left there is one of those trash pumps, and a little diesel generator that we take around to run when we're using an electric pump also from time to time. We don't like ramps at all. I haven't been out collecting. I have other co-op members. Another good reason to do biodiesel collectively is you don't have to do the oil collection. You can have somebody else do that. But it was December and they needed a hand, so I went out. And those barrels get really heavy when you're full. And they were putting ramps down in the back of this trailer and strapping it to a hand cart and then kind of balancing it up this trailer. And I'm just going, Jesus, guys. I mean, there's a little bit of oil and snow, and it's just somebody's going to break a leg. It's just, you really do, once again, have to think worst case scenario on this stuff. You need to be prepared for anything to happen.
One thing we've done in Utah, because we get cold there, for those that we went out and we bought a lift kit, put it on the back of the pickup, $1,500, and we don't have to use barrels with anything now. We pull up with a lift kit, put a fresh barrel there, lift our pull one in, put it in the back of the truck, strap it down. We now don't have to worry about pumps breaking down, et cetera, et cetera. It's an expensive option, but it's something also to consider.
What's a broken leg going to cost?
Pardon?
What's a broken leg going to cost?
Yeah.
That's cheap. A Tommy lift is.
Oh, they're wonderful. We love it.
I saw a 250-gallon tote with a pallet jack go off the end of the Tommy lift once.
Oh!
Fortunately, no kidding, we happened to have just had a plot and was taking delivery of a pallet of oil drawing. And put it back on the truck and off we went. It was in the school. So with the pallet, it works well, but make sure that what we started doing was basically tying it on so that we had a hook forward that we could hook forward. So before we went up, there was no possibility, because again, with water and snow and grease and had a pallet jack.
No, I was just gonna say, not that you should move full barrels of oil, because that's nasty, but barrel dollies are pretty cheap. Don't strap it to a regular dolly. Get a real deal barrel dolly, and then they're easy to, we use those for moving our methanol barrels.
Yeah, we've really grown quite a bit in that. It changes radically.
Sorry if I missed this, but did you talk at all about using suction or vacuum or pressure for moving oil, and whether you prefer
Not yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the Decent Breed folks will be covering that. Staying organized is a real important one. As you get up to collecting 20 or 30 different places that will be collected in different methods and on different schedules, it's a very good idea. We appointed a collection master, somebody that's actually in charge of organizing the labor, making sure that nothing's getting dropped. Because once again, remember, this is a huge commitment. You just can't miss. You get half your members on vacation and you don't pick up, they're going to drop you. When we first started doing this and we'd approached restaurants, there were 3 or 4 that had said, oh, we were giving it to a guy doing biodiesel, but he just wasn't reliable and we don't want to mess with it. So we also like to keep an eye on our community, who else is doing it, so that if they do have half a dozen restaurants and they do flake out and drop out, that we know who each other are. Maybe we can pick those accounts up and not have just restaurants in our community looking to get out. Once again, winter is kind of one of those worst case scenario deals. This year we had a warm spell in December. We were able to be pumping grease in December. If you get a warm spell, do it. Use every advantages that you can. And once again, a Tommy lift is very useful. Be a nice member to have in your co-op. As we do start to get into larger volumes, suction is really the way to go. That makes things a lot simpler. This is an offshoot business that started off in Lincoln. We'd sold a processor to a farmer in central Nebraska who doesn't live near town, doesn't have any oil, so he's going to start squishing his own sunflower to make his own oil. But the press was taking forever, so he hired his nephew who lives in Lincoln, bought him a diesel pickup to start hauling oil. Pretty quickly he started getting into huge volumes. They bought the Fuso for about $12,000. They bought the pump system for about another $10,000. So for a fairly reasonable amount of money, they've got a very industrial. This one has a Tommy lift on the back of it also, so we can pick up full barrels. But as we start to get into larger volumes, this is probably a much better way to go, but it's expensive. But once again, if you peg the price of that oil at $1 a gallon, this kind of truck can pay for itself pretty quickly. Kind of in summation, it's a good idea to be aware of local laws and ordinances when you're collecting grease. Each area is a little different. Graydon's got a heck of a problem. In Utah, he's got to be bonded, he's got to be inspected, he's got to prove chain of ownership. When he picks up oil, he's got to sign for it. They've got to know where it's going and inspect his facility. What a pain in the butt. It's best to be proactive about these things and make sure that I'd give the health department a call, see if there are any rules or regulations about this. I hate to get into it, spend all the money, and then get shut down. We also don't approve of stealing grease from dumpsters. If I go buy a par can dumpster and I spent $500, that's about what it costs. You can get a really nice 300-gallon dumpster, grates, heat tubes, the whole thing, for about $500. But if I'm going to spend that money and then somebody goes and steals my grease, I'm out. We've got a few accounts that want metal buckets so they can dump their hot grease into it. We're having to pay $5 for them, but they kept getting stolen. Somebody pick them up for us. Great. No, I don't want people stealing my oil, so we don't steal oil from those other collectors either. And that's no matter what the manager says. We get a lot of managers saying, "Hey, take it to shores, no problem." No, it really belongs to that hauler. No matter how much I don't like them, it's not ethical to steal their grease. We also, due to our collection methods, don't like pumping alone. If that overfills, if something happens and you can't see what's happening, if you're pumping oil out into the parking lot, like I've done on several occasions, you're creating a huge problem and a big mess, and you really put a bad face on the whole thing. So be very careful and plan ahead for the volumes that you'll be collecting. If you're only processing 300 gallons a week and you're collecting 600 gallons a week, you're really going to end up with a lot of volume really quickly. Now, we've had oil that's stayed good for 2 or 3 years, but don't count on it. Having that much bad oil around is a real problem. And think worst case scenario. Have a box of spares, plan on spilling oil, cam locks, time down. They come off. There are little things that can happen that you wouldn't realize, but when they do,
They vibrate into those pumps.
yeah, oh my God.
And isn't it funny how it still happens quickly and it takes forever to clean it up?
It's always the outcome.
What are your cleanup strategies if you're in this?
We keep a serious spill containment kit in a big yellow thing, but we don't like to use it. We have a whole bunch of other stuff that's from broken kits. We have a lot of socks, like the booms, that say if there is a big drain, to keep it from going down. They sell these kind of rubber mats that you can throw on a drain, but they're like hundreds of dollars, so it's kind of a crazy solution.
So you isolate the drain with a broom?
Drains, yeah, we don't want it getting into any sort of a stream or overflow drain type situation. We carry a small barrel of sawdust all the time, or several things of oil dry.
Oil dry is really good stuff. And if you carry 2 bags of oil dry, one of the keys is it starts to spread out pretty quick, but if you can get around it.
You have to contain it.
Yeah, and contain it first.
First,
Absolutely. Get around it
you
first.
contain it with kitty litter. And then I like to use the oil dry when the kitty litter, when you want to cleaner, that oil dry works really well to get the good stuff off the cracks.
That's right.
But you must
Kitty litter
contain it.
maybe cheaper. The oil dry is like $5.
Oil dry's like $5,
Yeah, $4 or $5 a
but
dry.
you must contain it.
Yeah.
Because if it's just spreading and you're trying to suck up over here or take care of this, it will flow to the lowest point, and it'll, oh God, a gallon of oil will take up a football field.
A gallon of oil looks like 20.
Yeah.
20 gallons of oil,
Oh.
you can't
It
imagine.
just makes you want to cry.
It does. Especially after you do it 2 or 3 times. Well, and a real quick story of kind of what can happen too is I got a panicky call from one of my crews. They were out collecting, and they had lost the output hose from that trash pump, and it sprayed all over this parking lot, just all over the place.
All over the cars and stuff?
No. But that's what came to my mind, is what if that parking lot had been full of cars, and he sprayed down 20 cars with oil.
Be hurt from Lexus.
What would you do? You'd be hosed. You're done.
You put darling stickers on the barrels.
You know, it's very important to think that way. What would happen if, and try to prepare yourself for this. Because most of you, small scale producers, probably don't have insurance for this. So, say you do $30,000 damage. The person who had that sucker pumper truck, I just talked to him, he said he had a spill. It cost him $1,600 to clean up. He said it wasn't a big spill. So I assume he did it in some high visibility place, and he had to call a company like Seneca. And we actually have those companies' cars in the glove box, just in case. If you get into the river, you get into the street. The only time I've ever pumped somebody else's dumpster, we came upon a dumpster. This place said, oh, they've abandoned it. Nobody's touched it in a year. It was overflowing into a creek. Now, we pumped about 6 inches out just so it wasn't overflowing into the creek, but to see stuff like that gives the whole industry and movement a really black eye. So we really like to keep things clean and keep things as tidy as possible.
Steve, do you have insurance?
On my truck, I do. No. No, that's one of the things. It's almost impossible to mitigate some of the risks and liability involved with doing this. That's why we have to be so careful, because you're really putting your neck on the line when you do this. Not that you can't do it, but just go in knowing fully well what you're getting into and be prepared for it so you don't hurt yourself.
Just a story while he's doing that about the thinking ahead of everything. The guy I do biodiesel with has a Tommy lift. He's got a Chevy Duramax, nice big truck. He swaps barrels out. He secures the barrels in the back of his truck and he secures the lid with a bolt. He was traveling home from collecting oil one day, going through an intersection doing about 35 miles an hour, and a lady ran the red light and he plowed into her until totally destroyed her car. It was her fault. Now there's a barrel of oil in the back of his truck. The barrel slid forward and smashed the rear of his back window out. But because he had locked it and because it was sealed, we didn't lose a drop. Had we lost a drop, and just a drop, the federal, you've all heard about my nightmares if you've seen the stuff in Salt Lake County. If I had gotten a drop on the road, I could have been fined hundreds and thousands of dollars because of how crazy it is in Utah. But you've really got to think about worst case scenarios. Someone pulls in front of you. Yeah. So We're going to turn the time over to these guys from Diesel Green to talk a little bit more about grease collection. Thank you for coming.
And just to expand on what he said, I mean, we don't really take into account on how much the oil weighs. I mean, just a safety reason. If you got a gallon of oil, just roll it up to 8 pounds. You know, if you have like a 55-gallon drum, literally weighs 400 pounds. That falls on you, you're lucky if you break a leg. With us, it's all about safety. We started off as a co-op, we moved into a business. My name is Michael Mullins. I'm with Diesel Green Fuels. My business partner is Jason back there. And just to start off, you know, when you're collecting oil and you're filtering oil, for me, it's all about quality. I'd rather have 55 gallons of high-quality oil that I can use than, say, 500 gallons of vomit. Because you are not going to be able to filter that and filter it and filter it. It's going to take up too much time, too much energy, too much money. So there's some really basic questions you have to ask. The very first one is, you know, how much oil do I need? Well, I need as much oil as I can get because I'm a legal renderer. You might be basically processing maybe 30 or 40 or 50 gallons of biodiesel. So your needs are going to be a little bit different than mine. But have this up in your mind. Because if you start collecting too much oil, you have to be able to store that oil someplace. And it'll go bad after a while. And you're going to run out of room. And when you have a contract with somebody, you are responsible for that. It's very difficult for a restaurant to go out and, you know, find somebody else quickly and efficiently. And it makes everybody else in this industry look really badly. So really what you're looking for in clean oil, or good high quality oil, is again, just, you know, you can look. You can go to Griffin, you can go to these guys here and look in their containers, don't steal anything, but you can look in their containers and take a look at it. Does it smell like puke? Does it look like milkshake? You got flies buzzing around. Do you find nasty things in there? Like nasty things I'm not going to say, but you need to know quality. And that's first and foremost. And then it's a good idea, if you go back to the kitchen, talk to them, see if you can get a little sample of the oil, titrate it on the spot. You know, you can either purchase it or you can make your own. You need to titrate it first. We had one client in Austin, Texas. We stopped titrating it at 20. We don't know what they were doing. We didn't even want that oil. I mean, what are you going to do with oil that titrates at 20? Absolutely nothing. You're gonna just call a Griffin and say, hey, you know, you can have it. I don't have the ability to process that at all. And another thing is weight of oil and how you're going to transport it. In Texas, if you're driving down the road and you spill oil, you're responsible for it. Your mother's not there to clean it up. That's what you have to do. If you're transporting oil, you need to either, if you're selling it as a renderer, you have to become a renderer in Texas. You can't just say, oh, I got me a pickup truck, a big old truck, I'm going to put some barrels in the back and suck some oil out, and then I'm going to resell it to people. If you're not a renderer, you can get slammed with that big time. If you're not going to go to jail, you're going to spend a lot of money on a lawyer and stay out of jail. But when you're transporting oil, it weighs a ton. Okay, my girlfriend has an S10 pickup truck. You know what it's good for? Picking up groceries. That's it. She looks really cute driving it around. You know, but when I first got into this with co-op, I was like, yeah, I got a pickup truck I can borrow from my girlfriend. I loaded 2 55-gallon drums there with oil, and I'm driving around, and I'm like, you know, it's not going anywhere. I'm in second gear on the highway trying to get someplace. So we purchased a 1-ton. That 1-ton is great. Man, it can, as my dad says, it can pull the hair off a frog's butt. That's true. You can load that thing down, and it's good to go. But basically, in transporting, it has to be safe. Okay? Don't think that you can just put an IBC tote in the back of a trailer and hog tie it down, fill it up with oil, and drive it around everywhere. You can do that, but if you get into an accident, those IBCs are made of plastic. If somebody punctures that, not only are you going to have a lot of pressure in that tank, all that oil pushing down, you're going to have a geyser shooting out the back. You're responsible for that. If some stupid kid comes around and says, hey, what's this, and opens up the valve at the bottom, you're going to have a geyser shooting at that valve. You drop 1 gallon, 1 drop of oil on the ground, you're responsible for it. So do clean it up. And basically, where are you going to store this oil? How are you going to store it? You bring it back to your place, your warehouse, your house, your garage. You need to have a safe, contained area that's just dedicated for that. Don't think, oh, I'm just going to move some stuff out of my garage and push it back there and I'll just pile stuff on top of it. You have to get access all around the storage tank because you have to clean that whole entire storage tank as well. So when you're done with storing it, basically what you're going to do is move on to spills. You notice that up there, what I say? When you spill, not if, but when, you will spill oil. There's just nothing you can get around with it. I mean, you can be as safe, as cautious as you want. You can have a bunch of spreadsheets here that you're going through. What's step 1? Open the lid. All right, what's step 2? Put it in the dipstick. Okay, you're going to spill oil. Have a spill response kit. Have a big tub with some kitty litter. I prefer the kitty litter. It's fairly cheap. Your biggest bet, like what we said earlier, was containment. You must contain the spill first. There's no sense with you getting a shop vac or putting down kitty litter, trying to contain this as the oil spills. down the road. Gotta contain it. Once you contain it, you can get a shop vac down there. Shop vac is your best friend. Man, if you're in small scale productions, you're gonna use a shop vac. Realize with a shop vac though, that if you get a 14 gallon or a 16 gallon or even a 20 gallon shop vac, oil weighs 8 pounds a gallon. Now, I'm a pretty, strong guy. Honestly, look at me. I can easily lift a 14 gallon shop vac with my buddy Jason, but you're not gonna be able to do it yourself. So keep that in mind with logistics. Always, collect and do this in pairs. With a still response, you're gonna have kitty litter, oil dries really good, shop vac, you're gonna have towels. They make do you remember those towels that we use? What are those called? Actually, you can wipe out the oil with, and it leaves the water behind.
No, I think of the square ones, like the petroleum.
Right. Do you know who makes those though? What?
Pig mats.
Pig mats, they do. But there's, man, I can't remember it now.
Oil dry.
Yeah, the
oil dry.
Oil dry. Stuff's great. Comes in a rag. It's great for cleaning off tables. It doesn't soak up water. It just absorbs. Won't soak up water, but it'll soak up
Like they've got like a
oil.
little plasticky layer and then the absorbent thing, yeah.
Yeah, so if you're cleaning tools or anything, instead of using soap and water, because you don't want that oil going down the drain, have it going down your trap instead. You're going to use that to actually clean off your tools and whatnot. But
if I could jump in here, and with the kitty litter and that, obviously some way to pick that up, a broom.
well, actually with kitty litter, a scraper, a floor scraper that's really good with about a 6 or 12-inch blade on it, and you're just going to scrape it up into a big pile. And then basically you're going to use a snow shovel, which believe it or not, they do sell in Texas. And you can actually use a show shovel because it's fairly large. You just scrape it all up and then dump that into your containment area to take care of later. And then basically just put down oil dry. That gets a very fine powder to oil dry. And basically you should have to do the same with that. And it has to be clean. And after you've done that, soap and water, mop, clean it all up as much as you possibly can. Oil will spread on everything. If you get oil on the bottom of your shoes, you've contaminated everywhere you step. You get step in your truck, you step in the warehouse, to the warehouse, to the truck, you've just contaminated that whole entire area. So think about that. Basically, when you're done filtering, like if you're going to be using large-scale filters or you're going to let settling take place, you're going to have a lot of waste, filtered waste, or food particles at the very bottom. Like if you're using settling, I love settling. Cheap, efficient, easy. Let it all sit to the bottom. What are you going to do with that? Where's that going to go? There's a place in Smithville, and I know if you don't live in Texas, it's kind of hard to drive, but do some research, figure out where you can dump that stuff. You might even call it Griffin. You might even call it Syntex or R&R, another rendering company. You can deal with them and try to give them all your waste oil and filtered products. Maybe they'll take it. We take it to Smithville, and they actually turn it into a gas. Another thing is, how do you test to make sure you have good oil? Basically, you're going to go back to restaurants, and you're going to take a little sample when they're dumping it, and you're going to basically check the water. And when you're done filtering, when you're done dewatering, when you're done filtering and everything up to make sure you have your nice product ready to be made in biodiesel, you're going to take that and test the water. Throw it in the microwave, or figure out, what we like to do is just have a hot pan test. We have a table, basically our testing center, with a hot pan, put it about 300 degrees. Think about a tablespoon, you don't need a lot. You're going to pour it on there, real careful, and basically, you want it at 300 degrees or 250, because once that oil hits the pan, it'll cool the pan down. And I'm not sure if you'll have Harbor Freights in your area. If you do, they're great, they're inexpensive, you can buy a laser gun with it, and just zap it. You don't have to be near it, you can stand like 3 or 4 feet, zap it. You can figure out the temperature of it. If that oil is over 212, you see bubbles in there, just a little tiny, minute bubbles, you got water. You got to figure out what your process is. And every single batch of oil you get from that restaurant is going to be completely different. The only thing that will ever be the same with waste vegetable oil is that it will be all over the map all the time. Sometimes it'll have a lot of water in it, sometimes it'll have a lot of food particles in it, sometimes it'll titrate differently. Same restaurant, same 55-gallon drums, the oil quality is all over the map. And it's difficult. It's real challenging. But hopefully you can work with your restaurants to try to smooth that out a bit. Now, when you're approaching restaurants, you're not even going to waste your time approaching restaurants until you find out the quality oil they have. We had a supplier restaurant in our area that we stopped titrating, like I said, at 20. What am I going to do with that oil? I'm not a high-scale, high-dollar rendering operation. I can't take that oil. I can't process it. I can't take 20 titrated oil and break it down to 2. Not with my equipment that I have. So don't waste your time with quantity. It's not going to help you out. What you're going to use all your time, your energy, and your value with is quality. You got to have quality with your oil. So once you find those restaurants that have high quality oil, that's when you're gonna approach them. That's when you're gonna approach them. But realize this, businesses are just like you. You don't want somebody coming over to your place and wasting your time. Eat that place, bring over your friends, get to know the people. More importantly, I mean, when I first started this with my co-op, I had one supplier. It was a Thai restaurant. And I walked in, and I eat there a lot, you know, and my girlfriend eats there a lot when she's at work. And, you know, I approached the guy and everything, and he didn't speak really good English, and I go, hey, you know, can I have your waste oil? I'm going to try to make biodiesel out of it. And he's like, oh yeah, waste oil, biodiesel, yeah, you can have it. Wow, that was easy. That was great, you just gave it to me. Threw a drum out there, started taking it, dumping it in, pulling it out. It was the cleanest, most wonderful smelling oil in the world. When you're done filtering it, basically, you just wanted to go out and eat at that establishment. Very little water, very few food particles. I thought that oil was like everybody else. I thought that oil was all the sports bars downtown. I thought that oil was like all the fast food places. Like, man, this is awesome. This is great. This is going to be so easy. Then I started getting up online. People were like, oh, my filters are clogging. I got too much water in there. I got this stuff that smells vomity. It makes me want to puke. What are you guys talking about? I don't understand. So I started doing more and more restaurant areas, and sure enough, that is not how all the oil is. So again, quality. Once you make contact with those businesses, you guys know what you're doing. Don't talk to the little guy, okay? Don't talk to the waiter. They don't really care. They just want to be friendly to you, so you throw down a couple of bucks for tip. Talk to the owner, talk to the manager. And you wanted to make it as convenient for them as possible. In reality, they don't care. They don't care what happens to their oil. They just want it gone. All they know is that they got a 55-gallon drum out there or a 250-gallon tank out there, and they just want it gone. So what you have to say to them is, hey, I'd like to collect your waste vegetable oil. It's going to be completely free. Completely free. And I'm going to take care of it professionally and cleanly manner. But one thing that you want to do is definitely have a contract, okay? A handshake deal works great with your friend. But, you know, we've had handshake deals before. And then once that manager or once that cook leaves or goes to another job or gets fired or whatever happens to them, that handshake deal is gone. And then what we had is that they had Syntax come out and drop a huge Syntax tank right in the back. And our barrel's sitting right there. And we're like, whoa, what's going on here? The owner didn't even know who we were. So we had to start from all over again. Basically going in, talking to them, explaining to them. You'll have that contract. And that contract is going to protect you as much as it's going to protect them. You want a contract that's going to benefit them and benefit you. All they care about is that it's going to be clean, it's going to be picked up, it's going to be simple, effective, and it's going to be taken care of. It's going to be no mess for them. They're not even going to know it's back there. So definitely contact the cooks, the managers, and things of that nature. Have a business card. You can go on Google and get business cards, like maybe 500 business cards for 50 bucks. You know, have something there with your personal contact number on it. And just write up a simple contract. It doesn't have to be complicated. Don't have to be a lawyer or anything of that nature. So the very last thing you want to do is pay for oil. You might have a different area where you're in, where you're living in, where it's really difficult, where the rendering operations have moved in and they've started to pay for that high quality oil. Really, payment for the actual restaurants is probably your last bid effort. I mean, you know, you might have a situation where, you know, you promise, hey, I'll just come in here with my friends every once in a while and we'll eat here. You know, what we have on our website is pretty much every restaurant that we have. We say, hey, we will advertise for you on our restaurant. We will tell all of our clients that come by and buy biodiesel that, hey, we got our oil from that restaurant right there, it's locally. And what they'll do is they'll say, okay, great, you know, hey, go eat at that restaurant. And if you can't tell the manager how great the food is, please drop our name. Please drop our name. Because those restaurants, they don't have to give you the oil. And in the future, that oil is going to become much, much more profitable. If you have a rendering operation that just dropped into your neighborhood and start making biodiesel, you can admit that price of oil is going to go up. Because that restaurant owner is a businessman, and he has to feed his family. And he's going to realize, wait a minute, I've been giving this stuff away free, and it has a market value, and I produce it every day, I'm going to start selling it. It's just that simple. Don't ever steal. I got a situation where I always tell this, if somebody steals from me, I'm never going to call the cops on you. But you might call the cops on me. You know, and that's just the truth. You know, I hate stealing, you know. It's just, but basically, you're also going to have on-site storage. Yes, I'm from Texas. Damn right it is, man. I hate people that steal. It's one of my worst things in the world. It's just tough. But on-site storage is going to be, it seems really simple, right? You know, get yourself a 55-gallon drum that you can buy with a nice sealable lid on. Just check it to the back of the restaurant. It's not that simple. You need to speak to the cook or the manager. Figure out where they want it placed. Figure out where the traffic is. A lot of our restaurants that we get are downtown Austin, Texas. It's party place, people are drinking, people are having a good time. People walk in down the alleyways all the time, throw cigarette butts in there, the big trash cans, they'll throw all kinds of nasty things in there. But you gotta figure out that if another rendering operation comes by and wants to drop their tank at that restaurant, you have to start thinking about people and how lazy they are. And some guy carrying a heavy 5-gallon bucket of nasty smelling oil. If there is a container right here, and the door's right over there, and your container's over there, what is he gonna do? He's gonna walk on down the purest container, put that lid, dump it, you'll never see a gallon of it. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna move your barrel, it could be 5 feet closer, right next to that barrel, but closer to the door. And that's where he's gonna start dumping into your container. And it's kind of sneaky to do that with other rendering operations, but you know, you're just basically moving it closer to the door. And you do have to make that personal contact with the people. We had one client, man, he was a great guy. He had a restaurant downtown, a little bar. You know, they fried up some French fries and whatnot. And when we first got it, man, it was lard. It was horrible. I looked down there and, oh, man, I can't do anything with this. What am I going to do with this stuff? So we had to go in. We talked to the owner, talked to the chef, and we were like, hey, you know, this trans fatty food, it's really bad. You should use a pure soy, pure canola. Make those French fries, they're going to be so much taste. So turn down the heat. Talk to that guy. That is the cleanest oil we get right now. A lot of people don't care. Again, restaurant owners just want to make money. Grease is grease to them. But if you can get them to switch over to high quality grease, canola or soy, you can get some fairly good quality oil from them. Another thing is that if you don't want to go with a lot of 55-gallon drums, or if you don't want to collect oil that often, you want to collect oil once a month, the best thing to do is get yourself a large metal tank. Say that you can move around with a 1-ton pickup truck if you had to, and push it back into a wall. Because basically what you want to do, what we found out is my dad makes barbecue pits for himself for propane tanks. Propane tanks. Listen to what I just said, propane. Propane is flammable. Not only is it flammable, it will blow up and kill you. So if you are not comfortable with welding on a propane tank to make a grease trap out of, okay, it'll probably cost you about $100. Let's write that down.
I'm writing down that.
Yeah, that is bad. Good, do that. Basically, get a professional to do it. Get a welder that makes propane tanks out of barbecue pits. Get him to weld on a little lid and everything. And, yeah.
I'm sorry, just, welding on propane tanks is bad.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, be very, very, very careful. But an alternative to that, air compressor tanks.
Yeah, exactly.
Easy to come by, never had anything explosive.
Yeah.
We very rarely find, they're hard. We can get propane tanks for $75. And we can get guys to work for them.
Yeah. We got a welder that can do it too. But what you do is that you fill this propane tank up with water and soap and everything. And then you fill it up, you take off the valves on the side, you put a big old nipple on it, you put a hose on it. You're thinking, what do you do with the hose? Well, you attach that to the exhaust of your car. It could be a truck, it could be a diesel, gas, doesn't really matter. What you're doing is filling that up with a non-flammable gas. And you just let it go. Just let it idle there. You let it idle and idle and idle. And then basically what you're doing is you're filling that whole entire container up with non-flammable gas. But what you'll see is the propane poofing out the top. And then, of course, you can get a guy that knows what he's doing to weld a circle, take that off, dispose of it. And it's really weird. Propane tanks have a gauge on the side, which you can kind of look at the gauge and say, oh, it's half full. I don't want to pick it up tonight. Or you can look at, oh, it's full. Okay, I'll pick it up tonight. And then you just want to put on a metal box on the side with a lid. It doesn't have to be airtight or anything, but what you're doing is you're trying to get the water out. And then you drill a hole on the side with a lid that's saying, this is your wall. Keeps the, so it's like a hole into it. And you have a lid that comes down, like that. On the lid of that lid, you're going to drill a hole through. And then the welder guy is just going to weld on a pull loop or a chain so that you can lock it. Just put a combination lock on there, and that way you give it to the cook or the person in the back of the kitchen. Every time they come out, undo the lock, open it up, plug the oil. Close the door, lock it back up. That way you don't find any cigarette butts in there. You don't find any kind of unmentionable things in there. Yes, the carcass manual. I don't like carcass manual, so if I found one in there, I'd probably cry about it. But, also if it's locked, nobody's going to mess with it. Nobody's going to steal from you. Another thing is once you have that small grain, it's only going to be about that big, just having, welded some tongues on the side. Go to Home Depot, find a screen. Doesn't have to be fairly big, small is better. Nothing that's going to restrict the oil being poured in. Just drop that screen in there with a nice little stick coming out the top. And that way, when he's done pouring his oil, as in French fries or whatever the nastiness that's being poured in there, that screen's going to stop it. And then you just go over, open the lid, pull out the screen, dump it in a trash can, suck the oil out of it, screen back. And that way you'll find out that you'll do a lot better in your filtering without having large contaminants in there. Oh, I'm sorry, Bruce.
Where's the best place to get these propane things? 'Cause I've been looking and
Butane.
butane.
Yeah, weird. Butane places have more propane tanks than a propane place has. They use the same tanks, but we can get over 75, 50 bucks a piece. Some guy comes up, drops it off the crane.
So the actual butane sellers.
Yeah,
Well, the first
butane
thing is
sells.
go to Craigslist.
Yeah.
If you don't find them on Craigslist, just look up propane companies and call every one of them, because what happens is, after 10 years, they can't be used anymore because of a little bit of surface rust.
Okay.
They're what they call decommissioned. They can't hold pressure. And so like this propane tank we go to, they've got a cemetery of propane tanks, hundreds of them. And they say, well, which one do you want? Would you get 250, 300, 500? 500 is just too heavy to deal with.
Yeah,
But with
unless you
two
got
guys can push around 250 pounds a day. Yeah.
And the propane tanks also have hooks on them, so if you do move up to a crane system, you can just drop them off the crane yourself if you have access to that.
And if
If
a
you
car
don't-
makes them, I'm never not gonna.
Yeah, they are solid. They're actually some pretty solid steel. That's what makes them really, really
Pictures
useful.
of it, I think.
Yeah. Plus, you're gonna have that they already come with legs. You know, they're solid steel. You can drop them off in the back of a restaurant. What we have done is, you know, we just slap on an oil-based paint on it to make it look all nice and pretty and green, and then white name on the side with your contact number and everything on there. So it looks clean, it looks professional. People driving down there, you ever drive down alleys or whatever when you pick up grease? You know, it's a lot of fun. 2 o'clock in the morning, 12 o'clock, doing that when you're, you know, off your normal job. And the 55-gallon drums, they just look horrible. Like, you can't even tell. People have their stickers on the side. You're like, what is that? It's covered in grease, it smells. If you get a 250-gallon tank, it does multiple things for you. It is such a pain to pick that thing up and drop it off. It's a waste of time. It's bulky. You got to push it back into place. But once you have it, you have 250 gallons of storage capacity. So that means whatever you were collecting from a 55-gallon drum, increase that. So that way you don't have to pick it up once a month. But yeah, you have to have a storage vessel to pick it up that's 250 gallons. But if you can knock down your time of collection, you just save yourself a lot of time and money and fuel.
So when it was, you know, 24 degrees in Austin in January.
For that one day?
So we had a couple more than that today.
Oh, okay.
But do you have
Well,
solidified oil problems in any of these?
I don't even know what you're talking about. I seriously don't. In Austin, if it gets below 40 degrees, the whole city shuts down. And everybody talks about their stories, you know, like, oh my God, it was horrible. I had this thing called ice on my house, and there was this white powdery stuff on the road. Well, did you drive anywhere? No, you just stayed and watched TV for a day. So I don't know anything really about, I mean, I don't know anything about like collecting grease at temperatures, like, it was solid? I don't know. I mean, it's like,
Don't move north.
yeah, I will, if it falls, if snow falls out of the sky, I think the sky is falling and I will leave. And it's not gonna happen.
Michael, so far your presentation, I'm really enjoying it, but I want to put it in context. How much oil are you actually collecting?
I'd probably say about 1,015.
1,000 gallons a
Yeah,
month.
about 1,000 gallons a month.
There's more that shows some of the equipment we use.
Yeah.
Pick up the pace from that, I think about 15 minutes.
Yep. So basically what you're gonna do is, you know, welding a chain to lock it, things of that nature. It doesn't have to be so pretty, but it does have to have your name and your contact number on it, you know? You might pick up some extra sources.
Yeah, we do. Oh,
Yeah.
I want to skip away from that.
Yeah. And keep it clean. Transporting your oil is really important. Again, if you drop it on the road, it's your responsibility. So basically, check with your state. Whatever state you're from, just be honest with them. Say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What kind of equipment do I need? I want to stay legal. Because when it involves the state, it's not a good idea to do something illegal and then try to backtrack it. Because once you get caught with it, you gotta deal with that. Not only do you have to deal with that, but it affects everybody else in this industry. So do it legally. In Texas, transport waste vegetable oil, as long as you're using it personally and you're not selling it to somebody, it's completely fine. The moment you start selling to somebody for $1 or $1.50 or $3, you gotta have a rendering license. So check with your local state. And basically have a spill response kit. Just like anything else. Kitty litter, sawdust, you gotta contain it. If you can have an inverter and battery pack, if you want a shop back there, that's great, it's pretty highly unlikely though. But again, figure out a way that you're gonna need to carry that all the time in your truck. And it can be just in a plastic tote, just throw it back, go with it. This is our high-tech transport system, it's a 93 one-ton. Works great. That's basically what we use. This behind us is our biodiesel dispenser. It's 1,000 gallons. Oil will basically flow to the lowest point. That's why containment is so important. And basically, you need to have procedures in place to prevent spills. You need to have procedures in place that says this is how we do it so that we don't have this problem in the future. Have oil dry. Do anything you can. It'll contaminate drinking water. It will clog drains like nobody's business. We were talking to a plumber, and he's like, yeah, I make a lot of money because people drop their grease, so grease down their drain, not even thinking about it. Completely clogs up their system. So not only do you have to snake your pipes, you have to snake the city's pipes too. So that gets pretty expensive over time. This is a sucker tank that we did not build, but basically, as you can see, it's just some valves. You can put a suction, a vacuum on it. Do contact Ricky if you wish. Write down that number.
That's not the right email.
Oh, is that not the right email address?
That's Rick from the co-op days.
Oh, do not
Don't
send that. I apologize. If you want that number, I can get it to you, and he can actually build a tank for you if you want. But that's generally
about $3,000.
right. The trailer that he's going to get it from Magnum Trailer. It can easily handle 250 gallons of grease, but the suction tank is amazing. It is a self-contained unit. It is a 250-gallon propane tank. You can tell the vacuum gauge. This is a small auxiliary pump. You hook it up to a compressor basically, and suck all the air out of here, so it becomes negative pressure. If you want, I can give you the pictures of it. If you want, it doesn't matter. And basically what you're doing is you're sucking it down with the compressor, and then as you're driving around, you're using this small pump to bring the vacuum down a little bit at a time. It's quiet, it's effective, it's great. It is just, this makes oil collection so much easier. So overall, the pros of a suction tank is it's much safer. It's simply contained. That thing is built like a tank. If somebody rear into this, we probably have to replace the lights on the side, and that's about it. You know, it's wonderful. It doesn't require gas or fuel. It basically does off electrical, and it sucks everything out through electrical pumps. It will push the oil. Oh yeah. It'll actually push the oil in, or I should say, I'm sorry, pull the oil in through vacuum. It is quiet, it is effective, and it doesn't chew up the oil.
How much vacuum are you using on that?
30. Yeah, pretty mild. And actually, that small pump right there, it'll pull maybe 1 or 2 every 10 minutes. You know, so it's not that powerful at all.
What pump is that, do you know?
I do actually. It's from Granger, and if you get with me later, I can actually give you the part number and everything. Yeah, about $180 and everything. And you'll also need these small little connection pieces on the side and the hose, of course. So, but basically, a sucker tank looks great because it doesn't chew up the oil. It doesn't make it look like a milkshake. It doesn't chew up all of the actual food particles in there. If you use a gas pump, it's going to take a while for that stuff to settle out. And I have a picture in here to basically show you the two contacts of that. The cons of it is, man, it's fairly large in size. You're going to actually have a place to store it. Okay? You're not going to put it like in your garage or in your closet or something of that nature, because that's a full-size trailer. Also going to cost a lot of money, like $3 grand. So you better commit to it. It's very heavy as well, and you're going to need a large truck to pull it. Don't think you can pull it in S10. It's not having. Okay, these things right here are nasty. I hate them. They're heavy. They're noisy, and they are incredibly smelly and require a great deal of gas. And they have their pros and cons, but they chew up anything you put through them. They're just trash pumps. You can get them at Lowe's, Home Depot, Lowe's. Usually around about $200, $300. I mean, they're great for moving large volumes, and they run for a long time. Their duty cycle is pretty good. But the problem that you're going to have with them is that they're incredibly loud. They're incredibly loud. They're very heavy. You have to move them on and off the truck all the time. You have to take them off and store them inside because if they get rained on, they're going to rust. You know, you're going to basically going to need to load it all over the truck, like I said, and they chew up everything. I want to make sure they chew up everything with a milkshake, and it takes a while for it to settle out. They're real fast, they're powerful, and they do come by quick disconnect, so you can hook a hose up to it, take a hose off, change the length if you want. Now settling. Settling is mucho important. I have a picture here. I'm not sure how good this picture is, so if you can, see how kind of light the oil is in this one, and see how dark the oil is in this one? This one right here is from a sucker tank. That one right there looks like a milkshake. It's from a trash pump. And this is basically a picture that I really, really wanted to set up. Because basically it shows you that if you don't chew up your oil as much, it'll settle out faster.
No heat in this tank, right?
Oh, please. Plastic?
Just checking it.
And after a month.
We have fuel lights on there, right?
Ew, my box, I love that.
Is it-
Set my whole house on fire.
Is that the only disadvantage, that it takes longer to sell out, or are you also
won't
doing
settle
something that won't settle out?
It just won't. It just won't. After a month, you can test it after a month, and it looks just like that. You can test it after a month, and the water is still on the top, because the food particles will hold the water in. And so you can use a trash pump. I mean, they're a heck of a lot cheaper. You can spend $300 on a trash pump and all the connections and everything. And if you go out and get a suction tank, you can buy a 25 or 50 gallon suction tank, or maybe a 100 gallon suction tank. Maybe you can build it yourself safely. It just basically comes on your needs and everything.
Can you go back to slide?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Now the one where you have the oil settling.
Oh, where's that one?
You're going too far back. There we go. Yep.
That costs $1.
Question.
Yeah.
With the sucker tank, basically what's happening is you're just making it so all that oil gets stuck to the bottom, air goes up, food particles float and everything, or?
You actually, the sucker tank that we have has a one-way valve on it, so that when it relieves pressure, when it has the pressure, that valve will open up. And so you're not dripping out everything from the tube in the tank. But to answer your question, it's going to suck everything out of that tank. But the thing is that it's not going to chew it up. So you'll suck all the crud and everything off the tank to completely dry. So you don't have to go back a month and clean off the crud on the bottom. But the thing is that the most important thing is it doesn't chew it up. If you get a pump that chews everything up, it's going to take a long time to settle. It's going to take a long time for you to filter everything out. Settling is so cheap. It's cheap, it's effective, it's easy. The only cons is that it takes a long time. It's very time consuming. It takes up a lot of space as well. I mean, those tanks there are like 600 gallons. You're looking at some major investment in real estate if you actually move up to this. But overall, it'll save you money in the long run because you're not going through filters like that.
For your sucker tank, what size line is it and how fast can you suck oil?
Yeah, 1 1/4 inch.
Okay.
Carry a barrel in about 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah.
It's pretty fast. I mean, you can't get as big of chunks as you could with the trash pump. That's a disadvantage of it.
But 1 1/4.
1 1/4 is pretty big. Yeah, it's got a nice storage.
Yeah.
We just got this in the last 2 weeks. And I'm there myself at 3 in the morning, in the dark, and it's all quiet and everything. It's my first time ever being able to do it like that. Normally you have to have one person holding it and one person watching the pump.
It's an army production with the gas pumps. You got one guy with a hose, holding the hose in, holding it in the tank, cranking it out. Jason usually goes in there, cranks for a couple of times, and like, he primes everything, gets it ready. Like, right, let me try. There's one will like, to get it going. Gas pumps are horrible.
And you breathe the exhaust.
Yeah, the exhaust smells great.
We've all burned our hands over the We gotta skip through this stuff. This stuff is something used to show you too.
Right, yeah. Basically filtering. Oh, I'm sorry.
Just a quick point about settling is you have flat bottom tanks there.
Right. And it's incredible. I'm glad you brought that up, actually. Here, let me show you. You see this right here? This is amazing. Inside these tanks, they have these strange baffles.
Like a dip tube.
It's like a weird dip tube that's...
Siphon tube.
Yeah.
Just like this?
Yeah. Well, no, it's not even that, actually. It's just this kind of hook. Plastic
You can get it to
thing.
go right to the bottom. I mean,
That's what it is.
Oh, it's like it's like this far off the bottom.
Yeah.
And you turn it on, you're like, oh man, I really hope it gets everything. And you're like, wow.
Frankie,
Yeah.
Frankie, the answer to your question is, we should have gotten it.
Yeah. But the
My
cone,
question,
the
which
cone
I didn't
pump-
ask yet,
I know what you're saying.
the question is, no matter where your bottom sucker is inside that tank, the food and the bits of French fry and stuff are going to pile up and accumulate. A small chasm will still remain where the
Right.
well can go,
Yeah.
but
We have a
eventually
large-
that you're going to have to cut a hole in the side to get a shovel.
No, we have a large hole in the
back.
top, and basically just put out like a long plate of steel, stick on like a, I don't know, wooden handle on the end, just move it to the side. Yeah, shot back out. Because we're not like,
Yeah, exactly.
it's not like 5,000 gallon tank that we're gonna have to send somebody in. I mean, you just basically go on the stick.
I mean, it's 7,000 gallon tank, you don't have to send people in just like this. But you do use a shop vac.
A 7,000 gallon tank, can we borrow that by chance?
Yeah, we got a couple of them.
Awesome.
Borrow's an interesting word.
Borrow? Transporting is an interesting word as well.
Get it out.
All right. 5 minutes out. Okay, I want to go to the centrifuge. Okay, filtering, there's basically, oh, I love them. God. Filtering, there's 100 different ways to filter. You can go blue jeans, you can go GE water filters, you can go oil filters if you want. It has to be efficient. You have to basically be able to set it up and walk away from it safely, and for it to filter all through your oil and everything. Filters cost a lot of money. And my personal belief, you don't want to filter your oil anything past 110 degrees, because it really opens up. and you don't get a clean oil. You're not going to clean through this oil guy. You also want to filter down into stages. Now, if you're making biodiesel, you don't have to filter that much. I mean, people just filter blue jean filters if you want, really cheap, right? You're not going to have to get down to 1 or 5 microns. I mean, that's just way overkill. But realize that the more micron lower you get, the better chance you get that water out, because that food particle holds on to that water. So my favorite is the dewatering the centrifuge. If you want, for small producers, you can go to centrifuge, simplecentrifuge.com. Talk to Randy, he's a knowledgeable guy, he'll talk your ear off. And it's going to cost you about $700. You're going to buy a bowl and a motor. And so it's quite an investment. Now, we spent about $1,500 building a very high tower steel. You can hit it with a car, it's not going to break or anything of that nature. You don't have to have that if you want. Randy's also working on a turnkey system. It's very small, it's compact, about 4 feet off the ground. And centrifuge, bowl, set it all up, and you can do it in your garage. And he basically says that system is as loud as a washing machine or a dryer. So you can actually do it yourself. But do talk to him, he's obviously the expert, he makes these, so he'll know more about it. If you can, look really closely like right here, and you can actually see the cake. The cake is all of the nasty stuff, the food particles, the water that slaps up against the side. If you're not too familiar with how a centrifuge works, is that a centrifuge spins very, very rapidly. 4,000 RPM basically, and you just drip oil into it. You heat it up, heat the oil up to maybe 130 degrees, just drip it in, and the oil will splat to the side. And as it fills up, it'll move over the edge, and only the clean oil will move over the edge because it's lighter. The heavier stuff will stay on the inside. So that is a downside to this, because this is somewhat of a self-cleaning centrifuge, meaning when you turn it off, there are literally 3 holes in the bottom, and the oil will drain out. That doesn't necessarily mean it's clean. That just means it's easier to clean. So you actually have to go in there with like a spatula with gloves on, and you have to clean off all the cake, all the food particle that's in there. So it's kind of a gross job. But it's going to give or take. It's like, people always ask me like, okay, how many gallons of oil can you process in a day? How many gallons of oil can you process in a week? It depends. How clean is your oil? How much water is in it? You know, you might have to tinker with it. And that's just something you're going to have to do. One of the,
How big is that? It's kind of hard to tell.
You know, you were standing up when you took this picture, right? Like up on.
It's a triangular framing, about 2 feet by 2 feet by 2 feet. That's the 3 legs.
Yeah, they're probably about 6 feet off the ground, 4 feet off the ground.
We have it really tall because we're
to move the gravity and everything. But you know what Randy stated is that his new system is only 4 feet off the ground. That you can actually put the cord in the garage. And you can build it however your specifications you want. Some of the pros of it is it's very easy, it's low heat, it has a continuous flow in the sense that you don't have to shut it down every once in a while, but you can keep it going. It uses very little electricity. One of the downsides of it though is that it's going to be really expensive. You really have to put all your eggs in one basket and say, I commit to this. This is how I'm going to do it. And you have to tinker with it a lot because you basically have to figure out, you know, how clean do I want my oil? How long do I run my centrifuge? And then you have to take your oil and send it off to be inspected so that they can tell you, is all the water out? What particulate matter is still left in the oil?
Can you sell a cake?
Can I sell the cake? Yes, if you want to buy it.
Animal food?
Animal food? I'm sure you could, yeah. I'm sure you could. I mean, how far is that?
That's for SPO.
Oh, well, it's biodiesel as well. So
we're talking about Smith.
Oh, toys. Yeah, but I'll come to 2 minutes. I love toys. Come on. And you basically have to send your oil off to get whatever micron. Like, what micron is this oil? How much water is in this oil? Once you got to finish tests and everything. So, pros of it, of the heat, most people are just going to heat up their oil. It's low production and you only need like 80 gallons a month, or 80 gallons a week or a day. We have a compressor basically. It was an 80-gallon compressor tank that we cut the top off of. Welded a hole in it, put a water heater element in there, sealed it, make sure it didn't leak, fired it on. It was a huge boiler. It's basically what it was. It's going to take up a lot of energy though. It's also, it's pretty dangerous to do that. You know, you're going to have to know how your timing is. You're going to have a fire hazard. The smell can be pretty bad if you take that pretty bad oil. So you're going to have to take that into consideration. You also want to be very careful because you don't want to fill it. You know, you just want to fill it up to the point where it's not going to expand. If you heat up oil, you know it's going to expand. So it's not like hopping into a bathtub. It's very up at the top of the rim. If you heat up that oil, it's going to pour over onto the ground and you're responsible for cleaning it up. But when testing your water for oil, it's very simple. Get a fry pan test, put your oil in it, turn it on 300 degrees, make sure you don't have any water in it. Some people put it in microwaves, or they can do it on the stove if they want, if your girlfriend or wife isn't going to be too upset with you.
Don't burn your house down?
Yeah, don't burn your house down, it's always bad. Safety, safety, safety. Anything that's bad that happens to you, it happens to everybody. Because people only really bad, you know? If you have an accident or a fire or something and it gets caught in the news, oh, biodiesel producer, or home brewer, caught on fire, burned house down. People are gonna run with that story like nobody's business. So whatever you do affects everyone else. Have your spill response, be careful, have a procedure that you have written down. It's just something that you really can't do. And a shop vac, my friend, in your shop for your garage is gonna be your best friend. Because on a low oil producing side, you're gonna need something quick and easy to pick that stuff up. And shop vac works pretty well, it's really cheap too. So, that was my presentation. Does anybody have any questions?